Thank you for being here. My name is Frans van Gessel and I'm working for the Ministry of Economic Affairs in The Hague in Holland. And this is currently under construction. We have a new government and the new government said that we should have two departments, so we're now splitting up. So I'm actually now working for two departments. And I was responsible for the first phase of the GDPR implementation for that department. I wrote the policy and I set up working groups and I set up projects to get this all implemented in the organization. Up to a phase where we could say, which was 25th of May this year, where we could say that we were in control. We're not compliant, we're in control. I'm also a PCB partner and I'm a trainer and auditor. I do the CDPO training for TSTC in the Netherlands. I've done that for 8 times now. So I trained DPOs in Holland, and it's a very nice workshop to do. It's a 4-day course, and I really encourage people to do that. So what I will be doing this morning with you is I will be complaining about GDPR. I will complain a lot about what it is and how we will try to cope with that. I will express an auditor's view on the GDPR and how difficult it is to get it audited. And I will also do an implementer view on the ISOs. There are several ISOs that can help you get a better understanding of how the GDPR works and how you can become compliant, if at all. And there's also, in the end, an opportunity for PCB auditing to get more involved in GDPR compliance. So, excuse me. So we have a GDPR since 2016, and the thing really is that it is not a standard, it is a law. But we're treating it as a standard. We go through it like, it is written like a 2701 standard, but it is a law. And so there are fat fines included for non-compliance. And not everybody is being driven to avoid those fat fines, but it is at least something that you look at when you start up a compliance project to get the GDPR implemented in your organization. But as I said, it's an auditor's nightmare, and I will stress on some points about that. So what we work with comply or explain in standards. So you either comply or you explain why you don't comply. We put that together and it's now complain. So we complain about all these new laws that are coming up to us now. So what are the flaws? It is when you look through the GDPR, it is a political product, and especially the first part is political driven, and it's disguised as a regulation. And I detest that. I don't like that. It should be it should be clear that what you need to do to get these things in place. And it's not concrete enough for compliance and auditing. And too vague to translate in goals. So if you're used to work in a 27001 environment, you are used to set information security goals and have a PDCA cycle across that to see whether you can get to those goals. And there's no management commitment. It's very it stops at the controller. The controller is someone vague. It could be the CEO of a company, or it could be the Minister of Economic Affairs, or it could be some director a bit down the line that takes this responsibility. So there are no dynamics in it. It's not dynamics in the vertical way, and it's a flat thing. The problem that you can have, and you see people implementing the GDPR, is that they are treating it as a tick in the box standard, which I said it is not. So you have to get these dynamics in. The dynamic of, you know, doing it better next time, and trying to zoom in on things that can go, that are not correct at the moment, but you have a plan how to set up a roadmap to become better and better compliant, which is so you need to be supported by a PDCA cycle, which you can find in the management systems standards. So because it's not finished, when you implemented the GDPR in your company, you're not finished. It's always going on, and you have to be aware that things can go wrong, and you need to get things prepared to be better and better. So there is a bit of self-regulation, which is, well, it's strange, but it's you can have that with the law. So there is in Article 40 and beyond, they talk about the codes of conduct. So you can have codes of conduct. You can have a category of controllers, let's say a category of marketing companies, or a category of metal industry, whatever, and they can together form a code of conduct. And the code of conduct then, like a PCB code of conduct. If you go with that code of conduct to your local DPA, your data protection authority, it can be approved. And when it's approved, it will be published by the European Data Protection Board. Which is, well, it's good, but there's no movement there. Nothing is happening. And so the law is there for 2.5 years now, and nothing is happening. There's nothing published on the EDPB board website. So I wonder if there's anybody thinking about developing a code of conduct for themselves in handling privacy information, or in data protection in general for their for the group of companies that they represent. So this is a problem. I don't see any movement there. I don't see any encouragement either from the government to fix that. As a you know, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, we feel a bit worried about. We try to help industries to deal with regulations like this, but no one has come to us and asked us for any help in providing these codes of conduct, or helping them develop it. So another thing is there is certification. Certification is provided within the GDPR. They talk about data protection seals and marks, and a European data protection seal. I haven't seen it. It's not there. There is not anything really that is helping us to assess within a company on an objective basis to see whether a company complies with these rules. And it says it's a voluntary certification, and it should be encouraged by member states. which is fine, you know. But when you work in an international company and you have you're an EU company within different countries in the EU, you will have a problem because you need to go to all the local DPAs to get a certification, voluntary. So you don't do that, because why should you spend any money on something that's voluntary? And there's a strange thing in the standard. I've never seen a European law of any kind referring to an ISO standard in its text. But ISO 17065 is mentioned as the auditor's guideline to see whether you are GDPR compliant. And that means that because 17065 is about products and services, it means that GDPR is considered by the EU itself as a set of products and services. Okay, fine. But then we have additional problems. Normally auditors of management systems, 27001, use 17021 and 90011 as their guidance. This is for internal audit and this is for external audit. So we look at those standards, and we need to use those standards because of our accreditation company that is looking at our functioning. So this is this was surprising at the least, and it is something that it's very hard to. It is still very vague. Appropriate technical and organizational measures is something that, you know, everybody can say it's appropriate, but as soon as there is a data leak, it was not appropriate. So, and how do you go into, as an auditor, as an external auditor, how do you go into a company to look at what appropriate technical and organizational measures are? And then in Article 25, it's about data protection by design, and it says something like, you know, such as pseudonymization and data minimalization. It's fine, you know, yeah, you should do that. Of course you should do that. But then in the same article, it says a certification mechanism demonstrates compliance. And then I'm totally flabbergasted. I don't know what to do anymore. So what I have to you know, as an auditor, I need to go in and certify a company because I need to demonstrate compliance so that they have appropriate technical and organizational measures. It's really a very sloppy thing. The law in itself is very sloppy. So, still, so 17065 flaws, well, they're not really flaws. So I'm sorry about that. It's a products and services standard. And it ends up with a conformity assessment. So you do that with products and services to see whether they conform a particular standard. Now, this is a funny thing, because in order to make a compliance with 17065, you need to have a conformity model, as it were, a scheme, something that you can measure. So if the GDPR says there should be a fence in between, you know, the building, or before the building, you should put up a fence, then the conformity assessment should say the fence should be 120 high and painted white or made of steel or things like that. So that an auditor who is, you know, well, he's not stupid, of course, but you know, he needs something concrete. He can go to the fence and measure it and say, yes, this is high enough. I declare that this is conform the products that the standards that are put up. So, conformity assessment. And not too many auditors in the country know about this, know about how to handle this. This is something that you find in laboratories or you find in mass production situation where there is a let's say a 9001 quality assessment in place, and you can then assess all the products and services that come out of that company to see whether they fit or not. But okay, let's go. Let's have a look at it, and let's look at GDPR as a set of products and services. Now there is this supervisory authority. Well, we know about that, and it's you have one locally, you have one in each country, and we have one in Brussels for European thing. The data protection officer, we have the privacy impact assessment, we have binding corporate rules, privacy by design and privacy by default, the records of processing and the data breach notification can all be declared as being a product or a service on its own. And there is a controller and a processor and the relationship between them. Well, there's not much new in this thing. The EU 95 privacy law already mentioned most of this, so there's nothing really a very drastic change with the place. So I won't be talking about the binding corporate rules because that's a totally different chapter. If you are a large company and you are working worldwide, you probably already have the binding corporate rules, and it makes that it puts you in a position where you can operate worldwide and you can transfer personal data worldwide without any problems. And these binding corporate rules are sanctioned by your DPA. So this is for the very large companies, and I assume that you're not belonging to one of those large companies, because it's the middle class of companies that's really struggling with this thing. Okay, so we will go through that and see whether we can find standards that will illustrate how this works and will support us in getting some concrete ground, some fundamental things under this fake GDPR stuff. If you have a ISO 27001 ISMS or another management system, that we could put this all into in a management system, in a PDCA cycle thing that will help us to be compliant in the future as well. So there is a ISO privacy framework, ISO 29100, and there is a PECB white paper on that subject, and it's a very good start. It's very good to begin with that and look through that. And the point is, this is a standard from 2011, way before the GDPR came out. And it mentions a lot of principles, and the principles are, if you look through through your bit through your hairs, you can see that this looks very much like how the GDPR is set up. So the principles. There's a principle about consent and choice from the data subject. The data subject needs to give consent for the usage of their data for processing. There's a purpose legitimacy and specification, so you need to have a predefined law or whatever to get your things done, to set it up. There's a collection limitation, so you need to define beforehand how long you will have all this privacy data, and its minimization. So you don't store data that you don't need, so you just store the data that you actually need for the processing. The use and the retention and disclosure limitation. So the retention is when do you throw it away, disclosure who may use it on a authentic basis, accuracy and quality of the data. Oh, those things are all in GDPR as well. So which means that you can use this 29100 to support your GDPR compliance. Openness, transparency, individual participation and access, accountability, one of the important pillars in GDPR, and information security and privacy compliance. So we can use this, and we will. And then you see that in the PCB white paper, PCB loves the PCA cycle. So you can see that they have split it up in a plan, do, check, act phases, and with steps and activities and things like that. People who are doing PCB courses probably know this this slide, because it's used in every course, I think. So you have something like this. So this is how they set it up. So you initiate a framework, for privacy and for data protection. You understand the organization. You analyze the existing organization. You do a leadership and project approval. Well, these are all the steps that this framework actually follows to get this thing working. And involvement of internal audit, management review. So you see that this is much more dynamic, at least in the vertical sense, where you have people lower in the organization have some responsibility or executive power, and there's always management review at the top, and there's always internal audit looking at how the processes are placed and how they perform in practice. So much more dynamic than the GDPR is. And then ACT is the treatment of non-conformities, continual improvement, etc., etc. So this is a very good first step to look at it. Then again, another ISO 29101. It's the architectural privacy framework, and it gives guidance on how to implement architectural things within the ISO 29100 framework. And concerns. These are concerns. We will talk about it. This is the first ISO standard that I've seen that actually portrays thin men in their schemes, in their illustrations. So you have things like that. So the Pri Principle is the data subject. That is you as a natural person, and your data is being collected. And the PII controller is the one who collects it. So he has a business reason to collect it. And this is the PII processor who does the PII, the privacy information to process it. So, very odd thing for ISO to have these thin men in their illustration. But I go into this 29101 because there are actually quite a lot of interesting things to consider. Now, there are 3 layers, and the 3 layers are, each layer is a logical group of components. So there's a privacy settings layer, there's an identity and access management layer, and there's a PII processing layer. And PII again stands for privacy of personally identifiable information. So your information, your name, address, your age, your social security number, things like that. It's all these layers. They go in length. It's very detailed stuff, but you have to look at it whether you want to implement this. So privacy settings layer, identity access, and processing layer. So in here, there's one for the PII, the owner. There's one for the processor, and there's one for the controller. These are all things that you need to consider. There are areas that need to be considered, and there's a communication between those layers. And I will show you that because this is a bit too much. So the privacy settings layer, what it does, it communicates system privacy policy and privacy preferences to the relevant actors. So identities of controller, processor, purpose of collection, etc. And well, when you look at this, you will see GDPR Article 6 things. And this works for the natural person, it works for the controller, and it works for the processor. So for the natural person who is working on his end station and doing his surfing and visiting web shops, the privacy settings layer would be something like the cookies that you accept. And the way you handle cookies, and you handle your wallet. So your wallet is on your your endpoint station, your workstation, and the way you want to communicate these identities to the rest of the world is really that's something that needs to be properly managed on your end station. And the controller, in its own right, who wants to know who is visiting his website, wants to have a clear view of the people that are visiting him and the way they interact with him. So these things need to be set up and really communicated well. And the thing about this 29101 is that it's very elaborate in explaining how you do the formal communication. Which means that in practice, when you're setting up something very new, you can start from it from the bottom and really go through the works and make sure that you don't forget anything. So, and then how does it work? Here on top you have all these principles, and this is I'm sorry, I didn't put that up. This is how the different layers. So the policy and purpose communication and the categorization work with the principles. So everywhere where there's a tick, there's something that the principle says about how you become compliant, and this is where you have to look at when you are writing a communication protocol or categorization or consent management things. So it's a very elaborate thing. Then there's the identity and access management layer. So this is the second one. And what it does is it identifies the actors and their ICT systems and manages the related identity information and how they access the privacy, the personal identifiable information. So the actors in their ICT systems, those are the three thin guys with their systems. They're all actors. So you are, as a person, you are an actor, the controller is an actor, and the processor is an actor. Now, identity access management layer, so I need to manage the identities of the stakeholders, I need to manage the identities of the actors, and deliver all this information, so communicate all this information to all the other components, and in the vertical sense. And manage mappings in case of pseudonymization. When there's pseudonymization, that means that I need to to have the possibility to switch back to really identify a person somewhere in the process. But in the normal way, this person is not identifiable. So how does that look in the principles? Again, we have the principles here, and this is your identity and access management components, pseudonymization scheme. There's access control, of course, and there's authentication. And how does that correspond with the different principles? So I'm not going into too deep level. It's just I just try to show you how elaborate this ISO 29101 is, and how you can use it to become to define a compliance or a compliant architecture for PII. So the last processing on the bottom, the last layer, sorry, on the bottom is the processing layer. Manage the identity information and how they access the PII. So this is actually the access in practice. And it does the PII collection, it does the transfer, the processing and presentation, and the storing and archiving things are all managed in this layer. And also there's auditing, logging and monitoring, something that is, you know, also in the GDPR a very important issue. We don't have that. We don't do that right. Now, then again, this one. Again, the principles and all the components for this processing layer. The management of PII, the transfer of PII. You know, there's a lot of principles that are hit by this layer. Validation, pseudonymization. If you do that. Anonymization is a thing within the ISO. You know, of course, that when you do anonymization in GDPR, the GDPR does not apply. So you can forget about it. Secret share, and the list is, it goes on. It's a pretty large table. So this is all described. And then they have these things as well in this ISO, and this is how a controller can split up different information sets or information processing over different parties, so that the risk is shared with different parties. And you'll have that. Let's say that this is your web shop and this is your individual PII principle. This is the web shop. And you know that what you don't want to have is any credit card information or payment information. So what you do is you have a contract with a payment industry thing, website, whatever, like Ideal in the Netherlands, or any other thing that will take care of payments. Or even you can say that you don't want any physical address stored on your own network, and you can have another service provider which will take care of the deliverance of the delivery of the product, to store the physical address, so that each processor is having a different set of risks, and it's split up. So these kind of things you can find in this ISO. So this is well worth looking at it. and see if you have any architectural issues implementing GDPR. It's a very good guidance to work with. And it's elaborate, but yeah, you just pick out the things that you need. Another one is the 29151. This is from 2017. It's the latest version, but the first one is, I thought, from 2013. And again, a very important standard to use, because it's an extension of 27002 guidelines, and it's in the same format. So you can really merge these two standards together and use the guidelines in 29151 to complement those in 27002. And it's so you actually merging two frameworks. So there's the 27001 Information Security Management Framework and the privacy framework from 29100, and you really put them together. And that's a very nice thought. So this is actually how it looks like in practice. And people who are familiar with the 27002 will appreciate that it has the same chapter information, and so you can have these guidances in here and merge them with the 27002 and put them in your ISMS. So then, when we look at the appropriate technical and organizational measures, as stated in the GDPR, when you have all this, I, as an auditor, when I look at your organization and I look at the way you handle this, I will be more confident that when you follow this thing to the end, that you really are up to the appropriateness of the technical and organizational measures. So, a lot of text. This is taken from the set, and from the standard 29,000 standard. I won't be going through all this, but if you add all these contents from this standard onto your 27001 ISMS, or your ISMS in general, then you'll be fine. You can use that and implement that. Then another ISO is the 27035, and it goes. It's about the data breach notification. You already needed to have that. So this is really a bolt-on onto your incident management framework that you already have. And I don't really care about whether you use 2734 or 20,000 or ITIL or things like that. It doesn't matter. You need to bolt these things on because there's a 27-hour, 72-hour time limit that you need to have to respect before you go into inform the Data Protection Authority, things like that. So this is how the principles work. It's not very, you already have that, so this is not very interesting. Threats, vulnerabilities, information assets, operations, you already have that. They exist in real life. And when something goes wrong, you will have a security event, and when it impacts an information asset, you will classify it as an information security incident. This is what the 27035 is about. And the thing that you need to do and add on is to look whether an information security incident is actually hitting personally identifiable information. Are there any information that is leaking out on the street or sold or not available or misused. So this is how you the whole thing of the incident management works. And again, it doesn't matter whether you use ISO or something, you will have something like that. You will have incident management in your company. And this is the clock. I had this clock made. This is a 72-hour clock. So when there's a security incident, we have a data leak, then we start the clock and it starts at 72 hours and it ticks back. And this is really frightening. You should do that as an exercise to see whether how your company reacts, how fast you will be able to. Somewhere in this thing, you have to decide whether this is an incident that can harm people because their data is on the street. And as soon as you made that decision, you have 72 hours to inform all the data subjects and inform your DPA if this is really a big thing. And you will be amazed how fast 72 hours pass in your organization while we're deliberating and thinking about solutions and thinking about how we can reach all these data subjects that we are exposing, and how we can deal with the press and communicate with the press and say that yes, we're very sorry that we lost all your data and that it's now on the dark web. Yeah, no problem. Those of you who were in Rinske's game last night, you know, you went through that data leakage thing, and you know how frustrating it be to deal with all these stakeholders in practice. So, bold on if you have something like that, well, make sure that you can manage these time constraints that you have. So then the privacy impact assessment. There is a 29,134, and you can use that as a PR. There are you need to do a privacy impact assessment when you are going to store sensitive data, or you do large-scale monitoring and large-scale processing of data from data subjects. You need to do that. But the criteria for performing a privacy impact assessment, they differ from GDPR. So you have to look at the GDPR, the articles that state when you need to do that. But then you can use the format as it is and the process as it is elaborated in the 29,134. And I have, being in Paris, I need to tip my hat for CNIL, Commission Nationale de l'Informatique et de Liberté in France, which managed to be mentioned in this particular ISO. With their PIA software, PIAF. And that's, we are looking into it to use it ourselves as a PIA format. So this is useful things. And there's a lot of text here which I won't go over, especially this must come from Germany. There's no period in it. Anyway, what it says is that the risk to the rights and freedoms of natural persons, which is that's a clause that you will see in GDPR often, that may result from personal data processing, which could lead to physical, material, and non-material damage. In particular, where the processing may give rise to discrimination, identity theft. Well, if you know GDPR, you know how this works, and these texts are this is recital 75. Then you need to do a PIA. So This is totally different from risk management as we see from 31,000, things like that, because we are always putting the data subject central, and we're looking at the risks to the data subject that need to be mitigated. Okay, so then the PIA process. So this is what you put up on the board when you are doing a PIA. You make the flow of all the personal identifiable information through your processes, and who handles it, who stores it, and how you delete it, either when the data subject wants you to delete it, or it is just time, you store it for 7 years, and how do you store it, how do you delete it after that period. So this is the basic set of ISOs that you need to that you can use to become a better fundamental under your compliancy. Other ISOs that might be interested for you is the 27018, is for personal data to the cloud. Cloud processing is a totally different sort of processing, and you need to have auditors who really understand the cloud business, and so it's not my terrain. I can't talk about it, because when we are going to the cloud as well as a ministry, but the cloud means a set of servers that we have in the back room. That's the cloud for us. So integrated risk management 31,000. We're going to implement that in the ministry next year somewhere, and so we're working on that. And there's a new version of 27005 available for risk management for information security. This is really an information security thing. It doesn't care about any privacy whatever. So all these ISOs, all the ISOs I mentioned will cost you. I'm not on ISO's pay list, but it will cost you, and it will cost you half a day of consultancy fees. So this is for €1,000. You're having all these ISOs inside, and then it will take you a week or two to read through them and really understand how they work and how they interoperate. But it's worth it, and it's good to go through the motions with those ISOs, because when you communicate with auditors and say, yes, we use this ISO to get all our appropriate measures, technical and organizational measures, then an auditor feels more secure in handling your request for conformity. So are we there yet? No, we're not there yet. We're still a few things short. The data protection officer is not it's not very well defined. There is in 29151, that was the 27002 edition. It's called a chief privacy officer, but it's not in the GDPR. It's not that way. It's different. So what I suggest you use is the working group 29 elaborations on what a data protection officer needs to do in your company, because they're all considerations about not being able to fire him or her, and unlimited access to courses and development things. It's very good. It's one of the best jobs that you can have in this moment. So, what also is not good, it's not well defined in ISOs, is the privacy by design and by default. But also in the GDPR, it's not well defined. And there are now books coming out on what privacy by design and by default is. In any case, whatever you do to define that, it will boil down to, implementation of non-functionals. You need to put in these non-functional requirements on system design and system development. So somewhere in your development street, as an auditor, I would like to see that you are doing privacy by design as a non-functional. It only goes for newly designed systems at the moment. So what do you do with all your legacy? Well, it would be a very good thing to put in privacy by design. Well, it's a bit too late for that. But at least make some effort to do privacy things in your legacy system and put them through the normal change management. How do we go with companies that work through Europe and need to have a certification from every country or a European data protection seal? Well, there can be an opportunity for PCB to really help these companies. If you want to use the 17065, you need to develop a scheme which will define that when GDPR says there need to be a fence, then in the scheme it says the fence will be 120 and it will be painted white so that an auditor can do something with it. So you need to use the 17065 to develop a scheme in a products and services fashion, and you put the whole GDPR in that, and PCB can do that. So they can own the scheme if they want to. It will cost them some money and cost them some effort, but they can do that. And they can also train the auditors. And because there's no need to accreditation, when we would be an audit firm in Holland, or in Belgium, or in France, or Germany, we need to go to the local accreditation company or in government thing to get an accreditation to be able to audit PCB, audit the GDPR for that particular country. But because PCB has an accreditation company in the United States, they only need to go with their scheme to the accreditation in the United States and have it approved, and then we can all go, we can all be PCB auditors and go out in the field and use this scheme to get all these companies certified. Okay, so dear PCB, have a look into this. There is a business opportunity here. Okay, this is my story.